Today, we're going to talk about Chandrayaan-2. And it's a story that has everything: huge ambition, real heartbreak, and, maybe most importantly, an incredible comeback. So let's set the scene. It's September 7th, 2019. It's the middle of the night, but honestly, millions of people across India are wide awake. They are glued to their screens, and inside the ISRO Mission Control Center, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone is watching one thing: a spacecraft called Vikram, and it's on its final approach to the moon. And you have to understand the stakes here. They were just astronomically high. I mean, if this works, India becomes only the fourth nation in history to land on the moon. That is an incredibly exclusive club. So yeah, an entire country was holding its breath. But wait, it gets even crazier. They weren't just aiming for anywhere on the moon. Nope, their destination was the lunar South Pole, a place that's dark, mysterious, and a place no one had ever landed before. So you're talking about adding a huge degree of difficulty, and of course, a ton of historical weight to the whole thing. So, everything, all the years of work, it all boils down to these last 15 minutes. They actually called it the 15 minutes of terror. Can you imagine? For everyone in that control room, for everyone watching at home, this was it. These few minutes would decide if a dream, years in the making, was about to come true. Okay, so to really get why this moment was so massive, we've got to go back a bit. This wasn't something that just happened overnight. This was the peak of a mountain they'd been climbing for years, building on what came before and dreaming of this huge leap for India's space program. And that dream was called Chandrayaan-2. Now, you might remember its predecessor, Chandrayaan-1, back in 2008. That mission was a big deal. It found evidence of water from orbit. But Chandrayaan-2, the goal was way bigger. It wasn't enough to just circle the moon anymore. This time, they wanted to land on it, to get right down on the surface and explore. So how were they going to do it? Well, the whole thing was this really cool three-part machine. First, you had the orbiter, which would just stay up high, mapping the moon. Think of it as the eye in the sky. Then, you had the Vikram lander. That's the part that was supposed to make the historic soft landing. And finally, tucked inside was the Pragyan rover, a little robot that would roll out and actually get its wheels dirty, analyzing the lunar soil. And look, this wasn't just some vanity mission to plant a flag. This was all about the science. So why the South Pole? Well, scientists believe that these craters, which are in permanent shadow, could hold huge amounts of frozen water. And water, as you know, is the holy grail for any future human bases on the moon. It's absolutely critical. All right, so fast forward. The launch was perfect. The journey, all 384,000 kilometers of it, went off without a hitch. The spacecraft is now in lunar orbit. So let's go back to that room, that silent night in mission control. The Vikram lander has just detached from the orbiter, and it's starting that final nail-biting descent. And the descent begins. You've got these powerful engines firing, acting like brakes to slow this thing down from incredible speeds. At 7.4 kilometers up, everything looks perfect. Every single piece of data coming back to Earth is exactly what they want to see. Nominal. It keeps dropping, braking the whole way. 5 kilometers. And you can just feel the atmosphere in the control room start to change. That intense tension starts to break a little. You see a few scientists cracking a smile, looking at each other like, we're going to do this. History is literally moments away. Okay, 2.1 kilometers, this is it. This is the last moment they get a clean signal. The lander is doing everything it's supposed to. It is so close. Just a little further to go to make history, and then silence. The data just stops. The screens go static. Then a voice cuts through the quiet in mission control, announcing that communication with Vikram is lost. Just like that, the smiles are gone. The relief vanishes. The whole room is just frozen in this stunned silence. They wait. Seconds feel like hours. But the signal, it never comes back. You can just imagine the heartbreak, not just in that room, but across the entire country. It felt like all those years of work just disappeared in a single instant. But something really interesting happened in that moment of what looked like total failure. A new story started to emerge, a story that wasn't about what was lost, but about how far they had come. And a big part of that was India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. He spoke directly to these incredibly emotional scientists, and he completely reframed what just happened. He basically said, hey, life has ups and downs. This is a huge achievement. He reminded everyone that science isn't some straight, easy path. This wasn't a failure to cry over. It was an incredible effort that deserved to be celebrated.
And here's the thing. This is where you find the mission's hidden success. Because while the lander mission was incomplete, the orbiter was perfectly fine. It was safe, it was 100% successful, and still in orbit around the moon. So what does that mean? It means the mission was absolutely not a total loss. In fact, most of the scientific goals were still on the table. That orbiter was, and still is, a huge success, sending back amazing data.
But honestly, what happened next is maybe the most important part of this whole story. The ISRO scientists, they did what they do best. They took that tiny bit of data from the final seconds and they pored over it. They figured out exactly what went wrong, some issue with the braking thrusters in that last critical phase. And they didn't just write a report, they immediately started working on how to fix it. And this right here, this timeline says everything. That heartbreaking moment in 2019, it wasn't an end. It was a lesson. It gave them the exact blueprint of what they needed to improve. All the knowledge gained from that hard landing was poured directly into Chandrayaan-3, which, as we know, made that historic perfect landing on the moon's south pole in 2023. They finally did it. You know, the story of Chandrayaan-2 is about so much more than just space. It's a perfect lesson in how science actually works. It's not about being perfect the first time. It's about trying something incredibly hard, learning from what doesn't work, and just being relentlessly determined to figure it out. So, in the end, the real legacy of this mission isn't that moment of silence when the signal died. Not at all. Its true legacy is the resolve, the absolute guts to get back up and try it again. It proves that sometimes the biggest victory isn't just about sticking the landing. It's about having the courage to try again when you don't.